Stop. Thank you. So if you don't want to be if you don't want to be visible, or you're eating your lunch or whatever, we won't be offended if you turn your cameras off. That's absolutely fine. You're very welcome to use the chat and interrupt us as we go through. So I'm Lily, I'm from Kent County Council, and I work for the Kent Research Partnership, and I'm here with Aisling. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Aisling Phillip. I'm from Community Care Inform, and I work with Kent County Council both across the children's and the adult services, supplying kind of learning and development resources for everyone.
Thank you. So this is the first of 3 sessions, and this is about what resources we have available in Kent County Council to find evidence and evidence-informed resources. So if you go to the next slide, please. In this session, we're going to cover the importance of using evidence in adult social care practice, some of the barriers, and how some of the things that we have access to are trying to help overcome some of these barriers. Aisling's going to give an overview of how to find what you need in Community Care Inform, and then we're going to cover a bit about how you can access other academic papers that you might be interested in. So next slide, please. So if you just want to use the reactions to let us know a bit about how often you use research in your role. And then if you click next, maybe something in the chat. Okay, we've got pretty often, we've got sometimes. Okay, great. And in the chat, why you think it's important to take an evidence-informed approach in adult social care? Why does it matter to you as people working in social care or supporting other colleagues? Just give you a few minutes or a few seconds to share some thoughts in the chat. Thoughts from anyone? To ensure best practice, absolutely. Learning from others. Those of us, or those of you, with professional registrations as well. It's part of frameworks, exactly. Keeping knowledge up to date. Thank you, Samantha. Brilliant. Other things that we've heard is it can help with people's their kind of confidence and well-being when they're making decisions and feeling able to ensure that not only are they making the best decisions, but they can feel okay with the decisions that they've made, or exactly rationale, defensible decision making, all of those kind of things. So I think we're all agreed in the room that it is important to be able to have access to evidence and know what the current evidence is. But we know that there are some barriers. So if you go to the next slide, here are some of the common barriers that we often hear. I don't have time to read widely, so I can't take a kind of broad view of what the evidence says. Research evidence is not necessarily relevant to my day-to-day practice. It's maybe academic and not that practically applicable. We don't have access to a library or resources in the council. I've heard there used to be a library. We don't have that anymore, sadly. Academic papers are not particularly accessible. They're obviously written for a different audience in mind often than practice or people who use services to access themselves. And let's be honest, they can sometimes be a bit boring. There are many other factors which take precedence when working with individuals. So you're not just going to read a paper and think, great, I know exactly what to do now for this situation. And we do also hear that I'm not confident enough about the evidence to incorporate it into my practice in different ways. So whether that's in reports that might be scrutinised in court or by peers or managers or whoever it is, you do need a kind of level of confidence in what you're writing, obviously. And if you are not routinely using evidence or not routinely, being able, having the time and opportunity to access lots of evidence, you might not feel that kind of broad confidence. So, bearing all this in mind, we put together the Kent Research Partnership, which has been running for about 2 years. So, if you go to the next slide, Ashling, this is a very brief overview. We have 4 work streams, and work stream 4 is around dissemination and impact and improving access to research resources. So this all kind of comes under that work stream, supported by the researchers in residence, including myself, to try and improve access to resources and kind of confidence and familiarity with using research evidence in all kinds of decision making in the council, from that individual level to more strategic, supporting people to use evidence in business cases, policy work, all these kind of things. So that's kind of why we're here today. And as a result of this, we wanted to fund access to academic publications, recognising that we don't have access to a library. But this has proved very challenging with all the different licensing required. So we decided instead we consulted with the Kent Academy Group and the Learning and Development team, and they said what would actually be most helpful for KCC and for colleagues is for us as the Kent Research Partnership to fund the KCC subscription to Renew Community Care Inform. So that's what we've done. So we're really happy that we've been able to make sure that we still have access to Community Care Inform for this year and probably next year as well. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Ashling to talk a bit more about how Community Care Inform is put together and how to find things there.
Thank you very much, Lily. Hello, everyone. So what I wanted to do before actually launching into the resource itself, because I think really practically seeing it is the most helpful thing, I did just want to give you a little bit of background about what is Community Care Inform and specifically how is it kept up to date, because at Kent County Council you have the benefit of having this huge kind of digital library of resources, but I think particularly when we're thinking about it from a research perspective and really those research skills, I think it's really helpful to understand kind of how it's commissioned and then how it's kept up to date. So at Community Care Inform, we have a team of content editors who engage with experts in the wider sector to produce all the resources for us. So they're all individually created for Community Care Inform, meaning you can't actually find these resources elsewhere. So we work with experts across the sector, be they academics, people from practice. We're producing more and more resources with people with lived experience as well. And so they produce a resource for us. We then break it down into a way that's really engaging and easy to use. So I think that the point that Lily made about those kind of barriers to learning, I think sometimes particularly like the language that can be used in academic writing can be quite kind of difficult to get through, and particularly when you're working in a time pressured environment, being able to get into information and read through it quickly and understand it immediately, I think is really intrinsic to making sure the research and learning feels like it is something that's effective as part of your daily practice. We're able to kind of react to changes and updates in the sector really rapidly. I think one really good example of this I've mentioned here is around the LPS, which may be something that was being talked about so much for a long time and then very suddenly went very quiet on. And Tim Spencer-Lane, who's our legal editor, who some of you may be familiar with, he's a very highly regarded lawyer, and he was actually working with the government around the LPS implementation. So when that was developing, he was able to provide us with very kind of up-to-date resource as that process was kind of growing. And then, as you may be aware, it has been kind of indefinitely paused for the time being, and we were able to respond actually like the day of that announcement. So I think that's just one very good example of how having access to an online resource like Community Care Inform, alongside giving you that kind of like that bedrock of kind of research that's being kind of developed over the course of years and years, being able to react to kind of those up and coming issues in the sector can also be really effective and helpful as well. Just wanted to give you a little overview of some of the other contributors who form Community Care Inform. This is just a very small snapshot. There are kind of hundreds of people who we've commissioned from over the course of the past kind of 2 decades. Some of them you can see are people like Susie Bray, Lydia Guthrie. We've also very recently commissioned resource from Michael Mandenstram around occupational therapy. You can see Stephen Richards, and again, yeah, Tim at the very, very top there. So it's just a little overview of some of our contributors. And I also just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of just the breadth of content that's covered on Community Care Inform. As you can see, this is just a kind of an overview of hubs that we have on the website, and I'll show you what I mean by hubs in just a moment. But just to say, you're getting a lot of kind of breadth and depth of information across a really kind of wide variety of practice areas and practice concerns as well. And you can see in that the little blue circle that includes resources specifically for people in management positions, supervisory positions. So no matter what stage of your career you're at, you'll be able to find resource that can support you in terms of kind of what you need to find out and what your particular learning needs are. Now, I do just want to quickly touch on to some of our kind of most recently added resources as well, because again, I think it can just be quite helpful to be aware that as much as there's about kind of 2,000 resources on Inform as it stands, we are consistently adding to that as well. So you can just see just a couple of examples here, a couple of pieces of case law, some webinars as well. But all of this also just to say that there's always going to be gaps in our content. And what we really kind of want from you as well is information on those gaps. So if ever you're looking for something on Community Care Inform and you can't find it, or you're looking for something kind of perhaps more specific than what we've covered already, do feed that into us because it's always really helpful. I can pop the best email address to add that to in the chat box as well when we come away from here. But now what I wanted to do is go into the Community Care Inform Adults website, because I think it's actually really helpful to just get the actual overview of that from a practical level of how do you use the resources. So I've just switched into the website. Hopefully that's come across for everyone as well. So Community Care Inform Adults, it's an online resource, so you can access it on desktops, laptops, but also mobile devices. So if you have a tablet or a smartphone and you're away from your desk and want to check something, then it's you can do that as well. We have kind of screen adapted technology on the site, so no matter kind of what size of device you're using, it's always really easy to use. I know sometimes when you try and use a website on your phone, it's nearly impossible, and that isn't the case with this. So I just thought that's worth mentioning. You can get onto the site just by Googling Community Care Inform Adults and will be the first search result that pops up. Or you can use the link, which is adults.ccinform.co.uk, and that will land you on the homepage as well. Now, before you start accessing the resources, you do need to log in. You just do this by clicking the green login button in the top right-hand side here. And here you can see it says organisation/council login, and this is the system that you guys will need to use to get into your accounts. So your email address for Community Care Inform will always just be your work email address. And when we set everyone up for access, we ask you to set a password for yourself. But if you haven't done this just yet, or if you think you have but you can't remember it anymore, that's no problem at all. If you just click forgot your password, put in your work email address and click next, that will trigger sending you a password reset email. And if you just follow those instructions, that's literally all you need to do to get into your Community Care Inform account. If you do have any issues getting into your account, or any other kind of technical problems arise, the best people to get in touch with are the customer success team, and you can reach them at ccinformhelpdesk@markallengroup.com. They're fantastic at getting back to people quickly, and they can resolve any technical problems you might be having. I'm just going to hop back onto the login page now. You can see all of my details are ready and waiting for me, and that's because the first time I logged in, I ticked remember me. So it just saves me a couple of seconds each time I go to sign in, and I can just click login and it will sign me right into my account. Just taking a second, there we go. So we're now on the Community Care Inform homepage, and I don't have time to go through the entirety of the website today, unfortunately, but I did just want to give you a little quick overview because I think it's quite helpful to see how the resources are broken up. So you can see at the very top here, we have these two little carousels. So we have a what's trending that takes a look at everyone who uses Community Care Inform and what people are looking at the most. So you can see, for instance, we have a little guide here to social working and CPD requirements and how you can meet them using Community Care Inform. You can see next door to this, we have a new and updated section, and this is a really fantastic area of the site to be aware of because, as I mentioned, we do review our resources very, very frequently. And if we do update a resource, it does mean that something's changed. And I think one of those major issues that we have in the sector is things are changing and developing all the time. It can be really easy for your knowledge to go out of date. Whereas if you just have a quick look in here every time you sign in to your account, and if there's something that's kind of popped into here that wasn't there before, it's well worth just taking a quick look into it, because it will just mean that you have a very quick way of just making sure you're as up to date as possible. If I just carry on down the homepage for just a little while longer, you can see we have a section here called Knowledge and Practice Hubs, which I'm going to come back into in just a moment. We have a whole section dedicated to practice guidance, case law. We have a whole research hub. I'm going to give you an example of one of our research resources in a moment as well. And if I carry on down here, you can see we have resources around legislation, and we also have a podcast hub here as well. So if you were looking for a particular style of resource, using the homepage can be really helpful. And what you can do is you can just click the tab of each different content type, and it will take you into that area of the website. So for example, if you were specifically looking for podcasts, you can just come into here and you can find all of our different podcast episodes. So for example, this is our podcast 2, personality disorder. And if I just scroll down here, what you could do is you could just click the play button and it will start playing out with whatever device that you're using. I do like to mention as well with the podcasts that if you want to listen to them when you're out and about as well, if you search for Learn on the Go on any kind of podcast app, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can find all of them there as well. So I think in terms of making time for learning and researching your day, that can be a really effective tool, because it may be that you listen to one on the way into work, when you're walking the dog, doing the dishes, any of those points of your day where you perhaps couldn't be doing another piece of work, but you could be listening to something. I know I personally find them a really helpful tool for fitting into my different points of the day. I'm just going to come back up to the top of the homepage again, and if I click the logo, it will take me back into the homepage. And I did just want to come into the Knowledge and Practice Hub. So in this section here, if again I click where it says Knowledge and Practice Hubs on the homepage, it's going to basically take me into an A to Z directory of all the different practice areas we cover on community care and informed adults. So very similar to the slide I shared with all the different practice points. This is basically a directory of where you can find those different practice areas and then the relevant content related to them. I'm just going to come into one example today, and I thought I'd come into our domestic abuse hub because it's a really good example of an area where we have a hugely wide array of resources. And what you can see in the hub is that we then break them down into smaller sections. So depending on what you're wanting to do some research into, you can then find a specific resource to support you. So for example, if I look over here, we have our section all around interventions. And it may be that, for example, I'm looking to find some information around working with perpetrators. So if I click that link, it will take me into the resource. You can see at the top here, we give you the information about the author, when we first published this guide, and when it was last updated. And then if I carry on scrolling down here, you can find a contents page. So this is quite an in-depth resource. It may not be that you have time to read the entire resource in one go, but what you might want to do is click a particular link and it will take you down to that section of the resource. So it may be that you're wanting to take a look at this section, particularly around making perpetrators invisible as dads. And what you can see here is if I scroll down, it's actually not a hugely massive section of the guide. So you could actually read the individual parts, usually in about kind of 5 to 10 minutes. And you can already see that we are kind of referencing different points of research in here, but in a really kind of accessible way. And all of the resources on the site are really geared towards that practical work. So again, when we're thinking about some of the points that Lily raised around kind of barriers, I think a resource like Community Care Inform is a really good example of something that is kind of very, very focused on kind of being research and evidence-based, but also being applicable in your day-to-day practice. I'm just going to come back to the Domestic Abuse Hub again, just because I wanted to highlight some of the different styles of resources that we have. So perhaps if you were wanting to use a resource that you could read all in one go, rather than having to go through the kind of contents page like we just took a look at, you can see some of the resources are highlighted as quick guides. And this means that they are very, very concise resources that you can read in entirety in 20 minutes or less. So this, for example, is a guide to identifying coercive and controlling behaviour. And what you can see here is we don't have a contents page, we go right into the resource. And you can see if I scroll down here further, in this key messages section, which we have in pretty much all of the quick guides. It's a very concise overview of key research points. So it may be that you just want to come into here and have a very quick overview of what the research is saying. But again, it then goes into some very kind of practical applications of that research and understanding kind of where this kind of theory then moves into your practical work with your clients. And you can see at the very bottom here, we do actually give you some very kind of clear practice tips as well. If I just come back into the Knowledge and Practice Hub again, I did also just want to highlight some of the multimedia resources that you can see are kind of signposted here. One that's a very new resource for us, it only kind of came onto the site at the beginning of November, is a webinar around domestic abuse and safety planning. This was a live webinar. If you're kind of signed up to your Community Care Inform account, you would have been emailed and invited to attend it live. But you can also watch it back. And I know quite often people like to use the webinars in group learning sessions as well. So it may be something that you want to sit down as part of your team and have that be a kind of a learning session that you can also get some really valuable kind of peer reflective work out of as well. I know we are kind of coming up to the Social Work England deadline very, very rapidly. And one of the requirements is for a piece of CPD to involve peer reflection. And I think using some of the multimedia resources on Community Care Inform can be a fantastic way of doing that. This episode is only about an hour long, and obviously you could kind of watch it, take pauses at certain points and have some reflective discussion, but also you could watch it kind of separately and then come together and perhaps just have a discussion in a team meeting if that'd be more suitable for people's time. And similarly, you could do the same thing with a podcast episode or a different group learning resource that we have on the website. And now the last section that I wanted to highlight in terms of an example of a resource is I did just want to come into one of our lessons from research. So this is our domestic abuse lesson from research. Again, you get the information around the author and when it was last reviewed. What you can see at the top here is we also give you some learning points that basically just summarizes if you are going to commit your time to reading this resource, this is the kind of learning you can expect to come out the other side with. You can see the full contents page. But something that I particularly wanted to just demonstrate with this resource is that we also provide you with a full reference list. We do this with every single resource that we have on the website, but I think the messages from research guides are really, really effective for this. And what you can see is a assortment of references our author has used when compiling this particular resource. Some of them will be charity documents, some of them will be journals or books. And obviously through the kind of research partnership, you will have access to kind of a broader array of learning materials as well. So I think now is a good time for me to pass back to Lily, who I know wants to speak on this a little bit further as well. So if
Thank you.
I
Ashley, can you just hold on that page a second? Because I also just wanted
absolutely,
to highlight, if you go, you can also cite the pages from Community
yes,
Care Inform.
that's
So I
very
know this has
true.
come up previously around people maybe wanted to use the fact that they have found information on Community Care Inform in this synthesized form, and you can cite the whole page
Yeah,
in a report, in a any, depending on what you're writing. So that is very convenient. I've certainly used that myself, and some people have said, but other people might not have access to it, and that's fine. It still shows where you have got that information and demonstrated that you have gone away and used some evidence in whatever it is that you're writing. So yeah, so firstly you can cite from there, but if you do want to access the individual resources that you might have found in this reading list or you might have found in a search, then we do have some resources for that. So if we go back to the slides, we have kind of three ways in which you can access the papers. So the first is, as you can see in the reference lists, a lot of them, they have the direct link and you can click on it and you might just be able to access it. A lot, even some of the journal articles, which traditionally would be behind a paywall and only accessible through libraries and things, a lot of them, especially things around co-production, working with people, there is a lot of movement in the academic sector to make these papers open access and as widely available as possible to share the learning. So first of all, a lot of the papers that you read might be open access anyway. For example, the Journal of Long-Term Care, everything on there is open access. There are other databases, and there are some resources on the Kent Academy around open access documents. The second one, which I'm going to go into in a bit more detail, is it available through Open Athens? And the third one, if you've tried those or if you don't have time and you want to access a paper, you can ask myself or my colleagues at the Kent Research Partnership. And through our relationship with the university, we are able to provide you with PDFs of resources. So that's always an option for you. But for today, I'm just going to show you a bit more about Open Athens. So next slide, please. So Open Athens is essentially an authentication system which unlocks access to resources for eligible health and care staff. And our access is provided through the NHS as other eligible health and care staff. So in order to register, you have to sign up for an Open Athens account, and this does have to be approved because we don't have NHS email addresses. So as you can see, if you go to Open Athens registration at NICE, we will send out all the links, so don't worry about writing it down or anything. It's also available on the Kent Academy under research. If you click on that link, you can register again using your work email address, and we just need to add other eligible staff in London, Kent, Surrey and Sussex. And if you click next, that will trigger a kind of registration email. It will get approved because, as I say, we don't get the automatic approval, but quite quickly you should get an email like this saying your NHS Open Athens account has been approved with your account details and where you can access the resources. So once you have that, I kind of star that email so I can go straight back to there if I want to go straight through to the resources. And what is important to know as well is, even though in the login section, once you log into Open Athens, it says email address / username. I think because we don't have NHS email addresses, we have to use the username. Putting in my email address doesn't work. So it's just a tip to be aware of. So next slide, please. What can Open Athens do? So once you've logged in, you will find my resources on the left-hand side, and this is a long list. As you can see, I haven't been as brave as Aisling to do a live demo, so I've done some screenshots for you. Under my resources, you get a long list of the different things that we have access to. So that includes the Cochrane Library, which is actually free to access anyway, but having it in that resource list is really useful to remind you as a resource that you can access. And Cochrane is really useful because they have these big synthesized evidence reviews. So you might think, so for example, everything from dance movement therapy for dementia to very specific health interventions and other things. The Cochrane Library is full of really interesting information. You can search in there for whatever it is that you're looking for, and you will be able to see the evidence from many, many research projects that have been undertaken on particular topics. So that's one. And then there are others, such as these kind of journal publication companies. So this one is Taylor and Francis. And you can see that if you click through to Taylor and Francis online from your resources, you will see at the top that it says that your access is provided by other eligible staff, non-NHS, in Northwest London for some reason. But anyway, it means that when you log in through Open Athens, you automatically have access to certain resources. So that's why it's quite useful to be logged in to Open Athens. And you can then search in the particular journal, the journal websites, which is one way of searching, but I personally don't find it that useful because we don't necessarily know which journals are under each company. And so while it can be useful to go in and see what they have in Taylor and Francis around social work, for example, social work teaching partnerships, probably what you're more likely to do is do a more general search, say on Google Scholar. So if you go to the next slide, or via the NHS Knowledge and Library Service, which then synthesizes everything that you have access to. So rather than having to go into each website individually and see what they have, I think this is a more useful option for us. We're going to talk more about searching and search terms and how to really refine your searches in the next session. So I'm not going to go into it too much, but obviously you might want to go away and have have a play with what you can find in the NHS Knowledge and Library Hub. And again, that's linked in the email that you get when you sign up to Open Athens. Below the NHS Knowledge and Library Hub on this webpage, you also have resources for advanced searching. And this is where you find the different databases that we have access to. So we do have access to a lot of health and care databases, which is really useful, but probably for those of you who are doing more research rather than kind of looking for things for practice, it's probably more useful for people engaging in more research activities. But just good to be aware that we actually do have access to quite a lot more than certainly I appreciated and what you may be aware that we have. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Google Scholar, which I think maybe some of you may be familiar with from university or from generally doing searches. So if you type Google Scholar into your search engine, you will come up with Google Scholar that's quite easy and intuitive to use. So I just typed in cultural competence social work education, which is just something without any of the search terms tricks that we'll go into next time, but still quite a lot of useful results came up. They do seem to be quite, the more useful ones do rise to the top. So if I wanted to read this article, as you can see, it actually says it's a Taylor and Francis article. When I clicked on it, already logged into Open Athens, if you put the next picture, you can see that automatically it's pulling through the fact that I'm logged into Open Athens and my access is provided through our login. So as long as you are logged in, you don't need to use the NHS search, you can use any other search. And because it's an authentication system, your browser should pick up the fact that you're logged into Open Athens. So you can search on whatever platform is helpful for you, and then and have the access to certain resources. So I'm going to pause there because I think we've covered quite a lot of content, and it's probably going to be something that you might want to go away and have a look through and come back to us with any questions that you have. I think that's the last slide. Is it, Aisling? So yeah, we'll just highlight that our next session is on the 17th of January. But if we stop sharing now, if anybody has any questions, comments, immediate thoughts about anything that we've shared or anything that was unclear, you're very welcome to ask now. We will probably we won't necessarily include this in the recording that we share, so don't feel worried about asking asking, silly questions or anything like that. We'll do FAQs to go out with the video that we share. So if anybody has questions, please do raise your hand or just jump in. Let us know.
Hi Lily, it's Donna. Can I just ask, where I used to work before, we used to have to link our Google Scholar account to our access to databases for it to pull through, and I had to watch a video and do it step by step to manage to do it. Do you not have to do that with the systems that you're using?
No, well, no. As long as you're logged in to Open Athens, you should,
Mhm.
it should, and you're using, on the same device and everything, it should pull through because of your VPN, I assume, rather than I don't know the exact technicalities of it. But whenever I've logged in,
If
I
you
haven't
did,
had.
they wouldn't make sense to me anyway, so don't worry.
Okay, well, yeah, I think yeah, it does seem to work for me. But if you have any issues with it, then do let us know and we can look into it. But so far, the ones that I've clicked on, I certainly seem to have access just by having, and you might have to re-log in to Open Athens. Mine, again, like Aisling said, I just click remember me and I tend to stay logged in. So if you're having issues, maybe your login has timed out, but it should, hope fingers crossed, pull through. I would say we
Thank
don't
you.
actually have access to everything as well. So when you search um, on different things, there are things on the left hand side of the screen saying just show me things that I have full access to, which I tend to do. But thank you for your question, Wenjing. The next topics will be around searching, so more about using Google Scholar and other search tools to find what you need, and evaluating the evidence. So how do you kind of appraise it? How do you judge whether that's a good piece of evidence that you can use, or what are the kind of factors that you might want to consider before you just start citing lots of journals in your work? So yeah, that will be the focus of the next session. And then the third session, the third and final session, is going to be more about what are the wider opportunities to get involved in research through the Kent Research Partnership and other opportunities that we have in the region. So one of our research fellows will come along and talk a bit about what they're doing, and some other opportunities like that. So yeah, hope you can join us for our next sessions. Yeah, definitely. Time for follow-up questions. Yeah, if you go away and in the next 2 months you have been able to use some of the resources, you've had any issues you want to speak to us about, you have ideas for what would be better, what you think we could have access to. For example, in your previous organisation, Donna, maybe you had access to things that we could look into, then please do let us know. We're very open to your ideas, and as Aisling said, if you have ideas for content, their content team is also brilliant. Yeah, and different ways of presenting the information to people as well. Any other questions? Otherwise, it's approaching 1:40 and we wanted to just have a 40 to 45-minute session. So in that case,
popped the email address into the chat box, which is our help desk email address. So if you do have any content ideas, you could pass them on to them in the first instance. They can then disseminate them to the relevant person.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I will just stay on. We'll stay on for a few minutes. So if you want to stay on and ask any questions or anything, then do. Otherwise, thank you for joining us, and hope you all have an enjoyable lunch. See you again soon.